Wallace Wattles' 3 Principles of Wealth. What if I told you that becoming rich isn't a matter of luck, the right connections, or being born into the right family? That there are actually precise, repeatable, scientifically proven laws governing wealth and abundance. And anyone, regardless of background, education, or current circumstances, can use them to consistently and predictably attract money into their life. I know, at first glance, this sounds crazy and implausible, especially if you've been working hard for years, but still haven't achieved a financial breakthrough. Especially if you've tried different approaches and hit an invisible wall every time. But hold on before you dismiss it, because this method is over a century old, and during that time, it has spawned countless stories of people going from extreme poverty to truly sustainable wealth. This isn't a theory. It's a proven system that works time and time again for people of completely different backgrounds, education levels, and starting points. In 1910, a man named Wallace Wattles published a small book that revealed this secret formula to the world. It was called The Science of Getting Rich. This book revolutionized the minds of those who read it. It spread from hand to hand, passed down through generations, and each time, reaching the right person at the right moment, it changed the trajectory of their lives. But unfortunately, despite the decades that have passed, most people still remain unaware of this knowledge. They continue to bang their heads against the same financial walls their entire lives, even though, with this understanding, they could easily achieve great and genuine prosperity. Get ready. Today, your mind will open, and you will discover a completely new, fundamentally different way to create wealth, starting from this moment. First, we'll dive into 3 key principles. But first, let me briefly share the amazing story of Wallace Wattles himself. Because understanding where this knowledge comes from makes it significantly more compelling. Wallace was born into poverty, in the rural Midwest, in 1860. Not relative poverty, but real poverty, where every day is a struggle for basic survival. For most of his adult life, he continued to struggle financially, trying different things, failing, trying again, and running into the same old brick walls again. But at some point, something changed. He discovered the principles he later described in his book and began to consistently apply them. The result was astonishing. He became a wealthy businessman and accumulated significant wealth by the age of 40. A man who had lived in poverty for most of his life, in less than 10 years, created the financial independence he could only have dreamed of. When the book was published, it resonated immediately and profoundly with readers around the world. Wattles received countless letters of gratitude from people who applied his teachings and saw real, concrete, measurable changes in their financial lives. Ordinary people, not the elite, not even those fortunate in their backgrounds, applied his principles and freed themselves from the shackles of financial hardship. There's a famous story about a copy of the book found in an old hotel in Sydney. A man named Charles Shelton stumbled upon it by chance in 1903 and began applying the techniques described methodically, consistently, day after day. Despite minimal formal education and no initial privileges, he built a vast empire in real estate and media worth $3 million. By the standards of the early 20th century, this was a colossal fortune, and it was far from an isolated incident, rather a pattern. Wattles' son reported that by the end of 1930, 500,000 copies of the book had been sold. Over the following century, these figures undoubtedly increased exponentially. Millions of people have tapped into this knowledge, and those who have applied it seriously have achieved tremendous results. The point is that Wattles wasn't an academician, constructing theories in an ivory tower. He offers practical, personalized, and universal wisdom, backed by real-life success stories, gleaned from his own profound failures and, ultimately, real success. This makes his teaching fundamentally different. At the core of his teaching is an understanding of how to tap into the invisible forces that govern the distribution of wealth. It all revolves around 3 core principles. It was their consistent application that allowed me to multiply my income tenfold in a single year. Not gradually, incrementally, but tenfold. And today, I'll explore each of them in such detail and concretely that you can begin applying them today. Well then, let's continue. Principle 1. Thought control. The first and fundamental principle of wealth attraction, according to Uddles, is thought control. The ability to consciously control what you think about, how long you think about it, and with what emotional intensity. At first glance, this may seem trivial. We've all heard something like your thoughts define your reality. It's become such a commonplace phrase that most people nod without even considering it. But Uddles goes far beyond these beautiful words. He provides a profound, concrete, mechanistic explanation of why exactly this works, based on what he calls invisible spiritual laws. And this explanation is completely different from what you've likely heard before. There exists a thinking substance from which all things are created, which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the interspaces of the universe. Thought in this substance produces what it represents. Let's break this down. Uddles says, behind all physical form, behind all objects, events, and circumstances that we perceive as reality, there lies an underlying universal energy of mind. This field is not passive. It is highly receptive to human thought. It responds to it, and it is shaped by it. When you think about prosperity consistently, persistently, and with emotional intensity, this energy moves to create that form in your reality. Uddles calls this energy God. The name isn't fundamentally important. What's important is to understand the essence. You connect to an infinite mind that not only thinks, but also embodies those thoughts into ideas, possibilities, circumstances, and events in your life. Your individual consciousness directly connects with this mind and directs it like a beam of light focused by a lens. This isn't a metaphor. According to Uddles, this is a literal description of how reality works. What practical implications follow from this? First, and most importantly, infuse your visualizations with vitality through emotionally charged, focused thought. It's not enough to simply think about wealth abstractly. You need to think about it with feeling, with joy, with gratitude, with concrete images. It's precisely this emotional intensity that accelerates the manifestation process. A cold thought without feeling is weaker than a warm thought with a deep inner experience. Second, never, literally never, allow contradictory thoughts, doubt, fear, anxiety, or beliefs like "this isn't for me" into your mental space. That only happens to others. I've tried it before and it didn't work. These thoughts aren't just unpleasant. They functionally neutralize your intentions. They're like static, drowning out the pure signal you're trying to send to the universal mind. Third, practice these thinking habits until they become automatic. This isn't a one-day job. Forming new, stable neural pathways requires repetition over and over, day after day, before the new pattern becomes your mind's default mode. Stay the course. Even if it seems artificial or forced at first, it's repetition that turns intentional effort into an automatic habit. Fourth, and this is especially important, act and think as if you already possess immense abundance right now. Not someday, not if everything works out, but right now, in this moment. Uddles says, doing this mentally literally sets spiritual and material forces in motion, beginning to work in your favor. This isn't self-deception. It's tuning your inner transmitter to the right purity. Principle 2. Gratitude. The second principle for attracting wealth is gratitude. And this is perhaps the least understood of the three principles, because at first glance, the connection between saying thank you and having more money is completely unclear. At first, you might reasonably wonder, how can a simple feeling of gratitude affect my bank account? It sounds like a comforting philosophy, not a working mechanism. But Uddles provides specific, engaging explanations of the power of gratitude, and they go much deeper than think positively. Here's a key passage from his book. The industrial and social world is very elastic. It will bend before it breaks. You can move toward success along your own lines if you patiently, energetically, and intelligently pursue certain courses. Well, on this idea, Udall says that the external world, including economic systems, markets, and social structures, is not a rigid, immutable construct that cannot be moved. It is an elastic, adaptive, living system, capable of restructuring itself in response to changes in the consciousness of individuals. The world will bend before it breaks. That is, he tends to adapt to a person, rather than resist his internal changes. What does this mean when applied to money? As you patiently and consistently shift your internal thought patterns, embrace an abundance mindset, and raise your energy vibration, primarily through the practice of sincere gratitude, the world itself begins to restructure itself. The financial systems and economic circumstances of your life begin to bend in your favor, adapting to the new internal reality you've created. It sounds almost unbelievable, but Udall insists. This is not a metaphor or empty inspiration. It's a literal description of how the spiritual substance that shapes reality works. It's flexible, like putty, and is constantly molded from our internal states. Financial systems have no choice but to structurally reorganize themselves in accordance with the new financial consciousness of a person who has changed within. Udall writes. Not only is there tremendous personal benefit in expressing gratitude and appreciation. This attitude opens up greater psychic powers. By psychic, he means connecting to those supernatural creative forces of the cosmos that the entire first principle speaks of. A daily practice of sincere gratitude maintains and deepens your connection to the spiritual source necessary for achieving and maintaining wealth. Why is gratitude so powerful? Udall explains this through the law of resonance. When you sincerely express gratitude for the good that already exists in your life, you vibrate with the purity of abundance, the purity of I have, not I don't. It is this vibration that attracts more of the same. Gratitude is not just a pleasant feeling. It is a precise tuning instrument that sets your inner transmitter to the frequency of prosperity. Specific advice on practicing gratitude from Udall. First, don't dwell on grievances against others. Focus on people or past problems. Every time you do this, you automatically shift to the frequency of lack and conflict and neutralize all previous work. Instead, give gratitude. This instantly recalibrates your vibration in the right direction. Second, make gratitude itself a habit, regardless of what you receive or don't receive. Gratitude conditioned by external results is unstable and unreliable. Real power lies in unconditional gratitude, in the ability to feel appreciation, regardless of current circumstances. Third, feel gratitude constantly and regardless of external conditions. Not only when everything is going well, not only when you've received the expected result, but precisely when everything seems difficult, complicated, and unfair. It is at this moment that the practice of gratitude has the greatest transformative power. By truly embracing this principle, not as a one-time exercise, but as a constant backdrop to your existence, you will notice something concrete and measurable. A growing personal magnetism. People will begin to gravitate toward you for no apparent reason. Resources and opportunities will begin to appear in your circle. The right connections will arise at the right moment. This is not a coincidence. It is a direct consequence of changing your vibration. Adopt gratitude as a way of life, not as a technique you use for 5 minutes in the morning, but as a constant internal state that permeates your entire day. Principle 3. Bold inspired action. So, we've covered two fundamental components of Udall's system. Intentional thought control and a consistent daily gratitude practice. Both work on the internal level, on the level of what's happening inside you. But there's one more, third, and final principle, without which the first two remain incomplete. This is bold, inspired action. Udall writes bluntly and unequivocally. Don't wait for a specific plan by which you can accomplish great things. Do everything that your hands find to do in the direction of your main goal in life. What does this mean in practice, concretely and without vagueness? As you consistently practice the first two principles, control your thoughts, and live in a state of gratitude, something begins to shift within you. Intuitive ideas emerge that weren't there before. Creative impulses arise in unexpected directions. You become motivated to take actions that previously seemed too risky or strange. These are what Uddles calls inspired actions, signals from the universal mind that point you in the right direction. For example, you might suddenly feel drawn to a new business idea in a field you've never seriously considered before, or suddenly want to connect with someone in a completely different field for no apparent reason, simply because something inside you says, "This needs to be done." Or you might feel a persistent urge to master a specific skill that seems unrelated to your current goals. The key word is react, and react quickly. Don't analyze endlessly. Don't wait until everything becomes obvious and safe. Don't put it off until the right moment. It is through these intuitive impulses that the universe communicates directly with you, pointing out specific paths to the channels of wealth you've opened through your inner work. Watts emphasizes: don't be afraid of not having a detailed plan. Don't wait until you have the full picture. Don't demand a guarantee before taking the first step. This is one of the most common ways people block their own progress. They wait for certainty, which never comes before action. It only comes through action. Just act when you receive inner guidance. Right now, without delay. Later, sometimes very soon, sometimes after some time, you will see the wisdom of the clue that may have seemed strange or illogical at the time. As you take risks, following your intuition, it's important to maintain an inner state of calm confidence, a relaxed expectation of the outcome, not a tense control over how exactly everything should turn out. A calm confidence, knowing that invisible forces are actually at work, arranging circumstances in your favor. You do your job, they do theirs. Watts also adds an important clarification. This principle works most effectively precisely when your ambitions are righteous, when you pursue wealth not just for personal consumption, but to create greater value for others, to solve real problems, to serve the greater whole. This isn't a casual slip of the tongue. It's a key element of the system. The universal mind with which you work is directed toward creation, not destruction. When your goals are aligned with this direction, the system works with you, not against you. Waddell's three principles form a single interconnected system, and it's important to understand this. They don't work in isolation. They work together, reinforcing each other. Control over your thoughts creates a clear, pure signal that you send to the universal mind. Gratitude increases the power of this signal and attunes you to the right purity. Inspired action is your reciprocal step toward what's moving toward you. Without the first two principles, the third becomes mere vanity. Without the third, the first two remain beautiful inner work without material embodiment. It is their combination that makes all the difference. Creates what Waddles calls a continuous flow. A state in which wealth begins to flow to you not as a fluke, but as a predictable, consistent result of alignment with the invisible laws that govern reality. On the surface, Waddell's three principles may seem simplistic. Some might say, well, think well, be grateful, and act. That's obvious. But the difference between knowing the principles and deeply understanding them is the difference between someone who's read about swimming and someone who swims every day. Waddles himself warns of this. He says, it's not enough to read them once and nod along. A deep, constant, living study of these principles is necessary, such that they gradually cease to be ideas and become part of your automatic way of being in the world. Apply these principles daily, diligently, consistently, and with sincere intent, not as a magical ritual from which you expect instant results, but as systematic internal work, with results that accumulate and compound over time, just like interest on invested capital. I applied these principles consistently for 1 year and multiplied my income tenfold. Not because I suddenly got lucky, not because I accidentally found myself in the right place at the right time, but because a systemic change in my internal state led to a systemic change in external circumstances. That's exactly how this system works. Expect a dramatic transformation in your financial life if you're willing to take these principles seriously. Not as another interesting idea you read and forgot, but as a real guide, a step you can take every day. I believe you can build financial freedom for yourself by first mastering your mindset, your inner state, and your way of interacting with reality. Others showed the way. Thousands have walked it before you. Now the door is open for you. Until next time. I wish you prosperity and great, genuine, well-deserved abundance.